It's probably here. A man in his 20s, wearing a white navy uniform, stood and looked around at a port. The port was in dilapidated condition and the buildings in the distance looked like a small fishing village, and they were still abandoned for a long time. "Hi, have you really decided to settle down?" A little Lolita who was about a teenager in a pair of white ponytails next to the man asked weakly. "Why, does Lafayette still like the previous life?" The man asked. "Well, although the previous life has made Lafayette a lot of good friends, Lafayette really prefers a quieter life." Lafayette squinted his eyes, looking like he might fall down at any time. Looking at the sleepy Rayfit, and then at the dilapidated port, the man couldn't help but smiled bitterly, and said, "This is really a start." The man took a look at the letter of commission in his hand, and saw that it said, "Commander Zingai is now appointed as the pioneer commander of the Azalain. The assigned area is the Koror Islands and surrounding waters, and the Koror Islands and surrounding waters are independently developed." Right. Azalain Appointment Bill and Calendar February 11, 420. This commission seems to be very beautiful. It not only owns the independent development rights of an archipelago but also the surrounding waters. It is like a noble fief, but you must know what a vanguard commander is. The so-called vanguard commander is to divide a piece for you. The frontline region, which allows you to fend for yourself after you have enough basic materials, is an alternative pioneer. The person seeking Xing Geichuo's relationship said that he would give him an island where a commander once lived, but what he never expected was an island that failed to develop, but in a sense, that person did not lie to him. Since it is a place where the development fails, there must be an unknown danger. You must know that this is not a peaceful world. Looking at the sea in the distance, Zingai couldn't help feeling. This is a blue planet whose surface is covered by 71% of sea water. Human beings are born, grow, nurture and develop their own civilization in this azure blue. However, along with them, there are constantly expanding ambitions and desires. Under the calm surface of the world, historical undercurrents surging. Finally, the unknown enemy appeared in the ocean, facing the enemy's overwhelming combat power. Mankind has lost more than 90% of the seas, and technology and living standards have rapidly regressed. Humans have created deep shadows on the ocean and unknown enemies, and call those monsters who drag them into the darkness of the deep sea as sirens. Decades later, in order to regain the glory of the past, the major camps finally abandoned their previous suspicions and jointly created a third-party military organization Azalain. In the early days of its establishment, scientists and military officers from various camps worked together to overcome many difficulties and finally expelled the sirens from the sea. However, the good times did not last long. The Iron Blood camp, characterized by tough militarization, suddenly announced its withdrawal from the organization and had several fierce battles with the historical opponent Royal. If it's just that, then it's fine, but one day an unknown force came, and people were surprised to find that there were many unprecedented islands in the sea, and the sea became completely different from before. After a general analysis, people found that for some unknown reason the sea area has become wider and stranger than before, but because of the blockade of the sirens, humans are powerless to change the sea. Until Dong Huang's fleet occupied an island, the abundant supplies on it made everyone crazy. Major organizations began to train more commanders, and at the same time they expanded with the help of islands. Sirens were also in major human organizations. The offensive was retreating, but the expansion of the sea also brought endless possibilities for the siren. After the human navy arrived in the sea, the siren became endless, and the human navy became difficult to move. At this time, the pioneer commander was born. They were sent alone to the islands in the far sea, where they developed alone. If they succeed, they will not only receive generous awards but also own the ownership of the sea, and the major human organizations are also extremely powerful. Promotion. The generous rewards have attracted a large number of commanders, but unfortunately not everyone can stand alone. Facing the endless offensive of the siren, most of the vanguard commanders were overwhelmed by the endless siren and lost their news. And the fate of failure is self-evident, but it still cannot resist the enthusiasm of the commanders. Every year, countless new commanders become a vanguard commander, and Xingai is looking for someone to forge the proof of the vanguard commander. He originally wanted to go to an island that had been developed by the human navy but was lost because it would not be too difficult to develop in the early stage, nor would he be too isolated from human civilization. He did not expect that Xingai's requirements were met, but he was assigned to it. Such a place. Xingai took a look at the fleet next to him. There are already many tweeted ships that have begun to unload supplies to the port. There are still some fleets in the distance. These fleets will return to the defense line of the human navy after completing the supply mission of the vanguard commander. And a large number of human navies gathered here can easily attract a large number of sirens, so these fleets must be made quickly, otherwise they will not only be easily trapped here, but also bring a devastating disaster to the vanguard commander. Xingai couldn't help but sigh a little while looking at the tweeting. Because most parts of the world are oceans, the military in this world is dominated by the navy, but the Navy Jukan is not a regular navy, but a life named Jian Niang. They are a kind of amazing life, and they are all women. And has unparalleled combat power at sea, so the main force at sea has been the main force. And tweeted, is a kind of magical creature that accompanies the ship maidens. Their appearance is like a chubby cute version of a little yellow chicken, about the size of a basketball. As long as there is a ship maiden, they will be there, and the reason for this has always been an unsolved mystery. At the same time, they are not just mascots. It is their job to maintain the port area, repair the ship's equipment, etc., because there are basically no other human beings in each port area except the commander. This is also passed from the establishment of the Azalain. The first implicit rule. Tweet and tweet worked very fast. After a short while, all the goods were unloaded. After a ship's lady handed the list of supplies to Xingai, after a military salute, she greeted the other ship's maidens and started to evacuate. Xingai smiled bitterly when he looked at the fleet going away, and at the port area where everything was waiting to be done. I'm busy now. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest. D1. This is the material box. Xingai walked to the place where the materials were piled up, followed the number, and came to a big blue box. This box was about 3 meters high, 5 meters wide and 4 meters wide, and there was a code lock on it. Xingai entered the password given to him by the official, and with a click, the box slowly opened, revealing the contents inside. I saw a peculiar instrument in the box. Underneath this instrument was a circular platform with a robotic arm in each of the 4 directions of the platform. The top of the robotic arm was something like a laser transmitter. Xingai walked over and looked at the instrument carefully. The instrument is mainly silver and blue, with a sci-fi style. There is a small console on the left side of the platform, and a column over 1 meter high on the other side. It is said that Jian Niang came out of this kind of equipment, and the conditions are the mind cube and some materials. Xingai took another look at the list in his hand. The material boxes D2 and D3 contained the mind cube and the materials respectively, the numbers were 200 and 100,000 respectively. The mind cube doesn't seem to be much, but Xingai used some hand cutting to get so much. You must know that for humans, materials are not in short supply, but the mind cube is different, because the mind cube can only be defeated. The siren can only be obtained from the wreckage of the siren. In addition, there are more and more commanders nowadays, and the demand for the mind cube is also increasing, leading to an increasing demand for the mind cube, and ordinary commanders will not sell their own mind cube. The average vanguard commander can only get 50 pieces at most, and the average commander is even more miserable. When he takes office, he can't even get 10 pieces. It is not easy for Xingai to get so many mind cubes. Open the D2 material box in front of Xingai, take out a mind cube, and play with it. The mind cube is about the size of a palm. It is a standard cube, light blue, and looks crystal clear like a fine crystal, and there seems to be a strange magic in it that can make people addicted. Is this the Mind Rubik's Cube? Hi! At this moment, Lafite leaned over, looking at the Mind Rubik's Cube in Xingai's hand, looking very interested. Well, it's this thing that the ship's mother can have life. This is very valuable for research. How about let's try it first? I am very interested in the process of the ship's creation. Well, Lafite is also very interested, but Lafite is more interested in sleeping. Okay. Xingai smiled helplessly, glanced at the instructions, and then placed the mind cube in the center of the platform according to the instructions, then opened the lid on the top of the column next to it, put 600 units of materials into it, and closed the lid. Pressed the button on the console that says Start Construction. I saw that after Xingai pressed the button, a bunch of light blue light was emitted from the tips of the four mechanical arms, and the mind cube slowly floated under the light. Under the light, a light blue figure phantom was gradually outlined around the mind cube. This is really a foolish operation. Xingai couldn't help feeling a little bit. Just now when he was reading the manual, he only saw this sentence written on the manual, portable small simple dry dock, all foolish operation, I wish you have your favorite ship. However, when Xingai turned to the last page, he found that there was a line of small characters in the lower right corner, because this product has abandoned most of its functions, it can only be constructed in lightweight, and quick completion tools cannot be used. The final interpretation right of this product belongs to our company. When he saw this sentence, Xingai's mouth couldn't help but twitch. With this familiar technique, it seems that these merchants are the same pitfalls no matter which world they are in. The time displayed on the console is 27 minutes, and because the quick completion tool cannot be used, it can only be completed by itself, but fortunately it is not long. And Xingai couldn't be completely idle, he had to check the supplies, and Raffi was already drowsy leaning on the console of the simple dry dock. Seeing this, Xingai didn't say anything, just smiled dozingly, and then went on to check the supplies. The most important thing for Xingai now is the construction of the port area. It does not require perfection, but at least one port area must have the most basic functions. Moreover, there is no place for people to live in, so Xingai must build the port area as soon as possible. Stand up. At this time, I have to mention the tweets. Tweets are very familiar with the construction of the port area. After all, most of the port areas are built by them. But asking them to build the port area is not free, but a price, and the price is a red diamond. Using diamonds, you can ask the construction team to help build the port area. However, as a high-level currency, diamonds are only recognized in many fields, so diamonds are extremely useful. In this way, with the exception of some commanders who are well-born, most commanders' diamonds are not easy to use. Xingai doesn't have many diamonds, only 500, and if you want to hire a high-level construction team, you need 300 diamonds. The prices for the junior construction team and the intermediate construction team are 50 and 150, but the efficiency is much worse. A little. Considering that this island is located in the distant sea, and there may be siren attack at any time, although Xingai is confident that no siren can beat Rayfit, it is also a very troublesome thing, because there are no facilities, after the war maintenance and replenishment are also a problem. So Xingai decided to rent a senior construction team under comprehensive consideration. As for where to find tweet, as I said before, there will be tweet wherever there is a ship's mother. So after looking for Xingai a little bit, I found a few tweeters playing in the water on the beach. Xingai walked over and explained to a few tweets about hiring a high-level tweeted construction team. A few tweeted and discussed it, and then one of them held up a sign and saw that it read, 300. There is also a diamond graffiti in front of the 300. Xingai handed the diamonds that had been prepared long ago to Chi, and several Chi picked up the diamonds, and then all ran away. Xingai is not worried that they will pit their own diamonds, because according to the experience of various commanders, tweets are very simple and principled creatures. It can be said that trading with them is much more reliable than trading with humans. Sure enough, a short time later, a chirp with a helmet on his head ran up to Zingai and handed a drawing to Zingai. Zingai took a look and saw that it was a design drawing of the port area. The port area on the design drawing is a circle as a whole. At the center of the circle is an anchor-shaped statue. The statue is located in the center of the bay. Opposite the bay is the lecture hall. On the right of the lecture hall is the Tactical Academy, and on the left, the Navy cafeteria is located on both sides of the sea by the canteen and the utility room, while the dormitory is located behind the Tactical College. Next to the dormitory is the supply store, and the warehouse is diagonally behind the Navy cafeteria, which looks very comfortable. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest. Let's build it like this. Zingai carefully read it a few times, and after confirming that there is nothing wrong, he finalized the plan. After seeing Zingai's consent, Chu Chu, who was wearing a hard hat, turned around, then made a beep with a short wing. Tweet suddenly, I don't know where many people wore hard hats and tweeted. They carried various tools on their wings and immediately started to get busy. The efficiency was amazing. It was just a daze. The ground was emptied, and a lot of dilapidated buildings left by the predecessors not far away were demolished. What a magical creature! Feeling at the busyness of the people for a while, Zingai went on to count the materials. So many materials could not be counted in a short while, and now he must hurry up every bit of time. Although it is said that even if there are missing materials, there is no way to go for it, but Zingai must have a bottom on the number of materials, otherwise in case something is missing, and then use the scheduled materials to the later stage, and so on. One day when I was eager to use it, I found that it was not available, but it was troublesome. It is always easy to forget everything when busy, until a girl's voice rang next to Zingai. Well, are you the commander? When Zingai heard about her reputation, she saw a girl with purple hair standing not far away. It was not difficult to tell from the outfit on her body that she was a ship girl. Yes, yes, I am the commander. Are you the new ship girl? Zingai looked at this ship mother and asked with interest. The purple-haired girl exhaled, then put a hand on her chest and introduced herself. I am a javelin, commander. Commander, please give me more advice. After that, she began to look at Zingai. The javelin looked at Zingai, and Zingai also looked at the javelin. Javelin wears a white sling coat and a red plaid skirt. The purple hair is tied behind his head with a black ribbon. He wears a golden crown ornament diagonally on his head, white gloves on his right hand, and a blue one on his left wrist. Wristband. Behind the javelin is a small boiler. On the left is a group of 5-unit torpedoes, and on the right is a double-unit 120mm main gun. On the right hand is a sci-fi-style javelin. These should be her ship's equipment. Zingai has been staring at the javelin, seeming to be a little shy. The javelin twisted to avoid staring at Zingai, and his face was slightly red. Perceiving the reaction of the javelin, Zingai also felt that he was a bit impolite. He retracted his gaze and said, Sorry, the first time I had my shipmate, I was a little curious. I was a bit gaff just now. Ahaha, the commander doesn't need to apologize, but I'm not the commander's first Navy girl. I just saw at the beach, but I didn't wake her up, and she's also a Navy girl. Isn't it right that the commander's first Navy is not her? Javelin asked with a trace of doubt. How should I put it? Lafite is still a little different from you. Now is not the time to discuss this, and I have nothing to help you here. Why don't you go and see how the work of Chu Chu? There is no requirement. If you have any, you can mention it. After all, this will be your home in the future, right? Zingai didn't want to continue discussing this topic, so he found a reason to throw a javelin. Javelin wanted to say something more, but when he saw Zingai's expression, he gave up. After all, Everyone has their own little secrets. It is not a good act to just ask others secrets. So Javelin went to the construction team. Looking at the javelin that left, Xingai frowned, but soon stretched out again. This place is far away from humans, and in theory, the ship's mother is also very simple, so there should be no problems. The construction speed of Tweeted is very fast. By the evening, most of the foundations of the building have been laid, and even the first floor of the dormitory has been completed, but it is still unable to live. According to the construction speed, it is impossible to live in tonight, but fortunately, Xingai just found a batch of tents and a part of portable military rations in the equipment. It should be prepared for the vanguard commanders to deal with this situation. Although the taste of military rations may not be very good, there is something to eat, so I don't have to wait a while to find a way to solve the problem of today's dinner, and it's easy to cause problems when eating randomly. Xingai took out 2 sets of tents from the material box and prepared to find a place to set up the tent. When he walked to the construction site, he saw that Javelin and Raffi were discussing something with the Tweeted, but basically the Javelin one said there, and Rafit just kept echoing from the sidelines. Seeing Xingai approaching, Javelin was very excited and ran over and said, "Commander, Raffi and I have carefully looked at the design of the port area. If it is completely built, it must be a very beautiful place." Seeing the girl's cheerful look, Xingai smiled and said, "How is it? How are you two getting along?" Hearing this, the Javelin nodded immediately and said, "I and Lafite Sauce are already friends." Lafite also nodded and said, "The feeling of a friend, Lafite doesn't hate it." Hearing the words of the two people, Xingai said, "I didn't expect your relationship to be so good now. I thought it would take a longer period of time. After all, Lafite's personality is a bit difficult for ordinary people to get along with." "How come?" Javelin shook his head. Although Lafite looks very cold, she is actually a very kind and easygoing child. "I'm relieved to see you like this." After saying that, Xingai found a flat ground far away from the construction team to unpack the tent and take out the various accessories inside. "Commander, what are you doing?" Seeing Xingai's behavior, Javelin came up and asked. "I'm going to set up 2 tents. You see, although the Tweeted are very efficient, it is impossible for us to live in tonight. You must know that the night temperature on the beach is very low, and it is also uncomfortable to sleep directly on the ground. We will be very busy these days because the port area is under construction, and we have to guard against the sirens' attack. Then why not build more companions and come out to help? More companions can always help more. What you said is not unreasonable, but we don't have all the facilities here. If you rush to build a large number of ship girls, it will cause a lot of problems. In the end, you will suffer a lot, but the efficiency has not improved much. You are still a group. My child, there is no need for you to endure hardships in such a place, so it is enough to have me now. The commander is really a gentle person." Hearing Xingai's speech, Javelin couldn't help feeling a little moved. Hearing Javelin's comments, Xingai asked, "Are you gentle? Not long after we met, there was such a high evaluation. Don't you worry that I was just doing something in the early stage? Is it actually a bad guy in the mainland? How come?" Javelin shook his head. The pretended gentleness is not the same as the true gentleness. Although it is difficult to explain, I firmly believe that the commander must not be a bad person. You are really innocent, and you can tell this kind of truth. It's hard to believe that you came into this world on the first day today. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest. The commander shouldn't be so strange. Javelin was a little unhappy. Although I was born for only 1 day, I still have the basic common sense of life, and my experience cannot be viewed in this way. "Ah, Commander, don't think of me as a kid who doesn't understand anything." Seeing the Javelin looked a little unhappy, Xingai smiled helplessly. "Okay, well, I am not complimenting you too. Yes, are you hungry? If you are hungry, there is self-heating in the B13 material box. I took a look at the military rations. There are quite a few types. If nothing else, we have to eat those things in the last few days. You can go and see if you like to eat. Seeing Zingai Javelin, who was still busy, said puzzledly, "Don't you come with the commander?" "No, I have to set up a tent here." "You can bring a copy for me. Ray Fit knows my taste." After speaking, Zingai continued busy setting up the tent. Hearing that the Javelin looked at Raffi and nodded, Raffi had to take Raffi to pick food together. When Ray Fit and Javelin brought the self-heated military rations, Zingai the tent, and at this time the sky was getting dark, but the construction team did not stop, but placed many headlights used on the construction site. The neighborhood of the photo continues to be busy as during the day. However, Zingai didn't need to bring their own light sources either. The self-heating military rations are packed in boxes. Each box is about the same size as a normal lunch box. It contains not only rice, but also vegetables and meat. It is quite rich. Even Zingai did not expect the military rations to be so rich. After the three of them had finished eating, they sat down in a clearing while watching the construction work of Tweet, and it was too early to go to bed now, and the noise made by the construction team made it difficult to make people fall asleep now. While chatting, Javelin suddenly asked, "Why did the commander come to be the commander?" "Well, it may be because of a desire for the vast sea, and of course Ray Fit is also part of the reason." "La Fight Sauce." Javelin tilted his head to look at Ray Fit, only to find that Ray Fit was sitting in Zingai's arms. Javelin yelled in a little panic, "La Fight Sauce, you, how did you get into the commander's arms? Is this weird?" Raffi looked at the Javelin with a blank expression. It's not right, oh, isn't this too intimate like this?" Javelin was already a little incoherent. Seeing the panic of the Javelin, Zingai suddenly wanted to tease the Javelin, so he said, "Tell you a secret, Javelin." "Hey!" Javelin looked at Zingai suspiciously. "Actually, Raffi and I are husband and wife." The Javelin stood up from the ground at once and made a louder sound than before, which overwhelmed the construction noise of the tweeted and attracted a lot of attention from the tweeted. I found myself being stared at by many tweeted, and the Javelin hurriedly sat down, blushing and bowed his head and said, "Is what the commander said is true?" "Of course it is true, why should I lie to you?" Zingai asked back. But... Javelin paused for a while, and said, "Why did the commander tell me these things?" Zingai smiled and said, "Isn't this right, lest there be any intimate behavior between La Fight and I will let you see any misunderstandings? Wouldn't it be good to have a precaution in advance? Intimate action." Javelin didn't seem to listen to the second half of the sentence, and even buried his head deeper, as if steam was coming from his head. After a while, the Javelin finally slowed down, but his small face was still a little red, and he looked very cute. Long Javelin exhaled, glanced at La Fight, and whispered, "When did La Fight make an oath with the commander?" After stopping for a while, he found that he seemed a little rash, and hurriedly said, "No La Fight, you can leave it alone if you want to tell me." Raffi thought for a while, shook his head and said, "Raffi doesn't remember it, only remember that it was a long time ago." Raffi remembered that there were many enemies that day, it was very dangerous, Raffi was injured in order to protect the sea. "I was in a coma, and when Raffi woke up, I told Raffi that Raffi was already Has wife. Isn't it that I haven't experienced anything?" Javelin was a little disappointed and then angrily said to Zingai, "Why did the commander pick on such a day? The oath ceremony is very important to girls, why can it be so casual?" Seeing the enraged Javelin at this time, Zingai couldn't help smiling wryly, "Well, it was really a special situation that day. Later I wanted to do it again, but for various reasons I kept dragging it and then I forgot." "How can the commander forget such an important thing? It's really irresponsible." Javelin seemed to be even more angry, she thought for a while, and suddenly had an idea. It's better to hold another vow ceremony for the commander and Rafa during the Chinese New Year next year. I have asked them before. It is now in April, and there should be a long time before next year. At that time, our port area will also the construction is completed, and we will have more companions. At that time, it will be a perfect oath ceremony. Javelin looks at the stars. What do you think of the commander-in-law fight? Xingai looked at Rafi in his arms and found that Rafi was also looking at him. Although Rafi had no expression on his face, Xingai still saw a trace of longing in Rafi's eyes. Thinking that he really owed Rafi a little bit, Xingai touched Rafi's head with pity, and said, "Okay, it's so decided. I will definitely give Rafi the most perfect oath ritual. Remember to remind me of the javelin." "Oh! Don't worry, Commander, this arduous task is left to me, and I will definitely not forget it." The javelin patted his chest, expressing his determination. La Fight didn't speak, but he leaned his body closer into Xingai's arms. When it was a little bit deeper at night, all of them stopped work and the lights on the construction site were also turned off. They didn't know where to go to rest. In addition, there is nothing to do now, so the three of them are ready to go to sleep. When the tent was allocated, Rafi wanted to sleep with Xingai, but Rafi was dragged away by the javelin, saying that he was going to hold a night party for girls. Seeing that Rafi didn't object to Xingai, they let them go. Anyway, there are only 2 girls on the island now, and it's good to exchange feelings. Xingai had already got up the next day when there was a glimmer of light. He had already counted all the supplies yesterday. What he has to do today is only a detailed statistics, which is not very troublesome. Tweets started working at dawn. The 2 girls seemed to be awakened by the noise of Tweet's construction and walked out of the tent. Xingai looked over and found that the 2 girls seemed to be in a good mood. They didn't know what they talked about yesterday. It's impossible to say that they didn't care at all. But since Rafi didn't say anything, Xingai didn't ask, because Rafi Fei will definitely tell herself when she wants to tell herself. The 2 girls were talking very happily, but La Fight suddenly had a meal, and then quickly walked to Xingai. "See, there is a siren near this island. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest." "How many sirens are there?" Xingai did not question Rafa's words. The depth of the bond between the two is not understandable by ordinary people. Often one eye and one action can tell what the other person means, so Xingai knows that Rafa has not lied to him now. There are 7 siren in total, 1 in human form, 6 in ship form, and no large hull, Rafa replied. Hu Xingai exhaled, "Fortunately, there are not many enemies, Rafa, you should be able to handle it." "No problem," Rafi said. Hearing the conversation between the two, Javelin suddenly asked weakly, "Well, how did Rafa know that a siren is here?" "I didn't see a siren at all. La Fight's radar range is relatively large, so La Fight feels it." La Fight explained. "Is the radar on the hull of La Fight so powerful? By the way, I don't seem to have seen the hull of La Fight, is it placed elsewhere?" Javelin nodded his face and thought. The ship's armor is not always on her body, which is inconvenient and will cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the ship will turn her ship into a hull, that is, a ship, and then dock at the port. When fighting is needed, the hull can be transformed into a ship to fight. Of course, the hull is not without combat effectiveness. A normal ship has all the functional hulls, but it is far less flexible than the navy that carries the ship equipment. La Fight's hull was damaged, and it is still being repaired. Xingai replied. "Hey, isn't Rafi unable to fight anymore?" Javelin said in surprise. "Rafi, you can still fight." After saying that, Rafi looked at Xingai, as if waiting for Xingai's order. But Javelin wanted to say something, but Xingai interrupted her. "Don't worry about the javelin. Rayfit has a wealth of combat experience. The enemy Rayfit will not see this. Speaking of javelin, it is the first time to fight. Are you not afraid? Xingai smiled. Really, Commander, you are treating me like a kid again. Javelin summoned his own ship suit directly. I am not a vase, let the commander see my heroic appearance, I am very strong. Xingai couldn't help being a little amused when he saw the serious Javelin, and said, okay, I know you're great, but anyway, this is your first battle. It's better to be careful. I can fight, but the battle experience has to be accumulated slowly. That's also true. Javelin nodded, turned to see Ray Fit still standing there and said in confusion, why doesn't Ray Fit summon the ship outfit? Is it so serious that the ship outfit can't be summoned? It's better to leave me alone. Although there are a lot of enemies, if I try hard, I should still be possible. No. Xingai shook his head and said, this is the open sea. The siren level here is much higher than that of the inner sea. 7 sirens are not something you can solve with a first-level ship. Although Javelin was a little unconvinced, she still did not refute, because she was only brought to this port area yesterday, and indeed only 1 level. Without the help of a high-level ship, she will not only be unable to repel the siren, but may even be the plug sinks. Thinking of this, Javelin couldn't help but feel a little sad. If I can be stronger, it would be great. If I can be stronger, La Fight Sauce, I can play without injury, all because I am too weak. Seeing that the Javelin was a little lost, he touched the head of the Javelin in front of the Star Sea, and said, don't be sad, Javelin, these are not to blame for you, but to make you who have just arrived on the battlefield make mistakes, but it's very strong. You can just watch the show next to you this time. You say I'm right, La Fight. Yeah, La Fight nodded, La Fight, but very strong. Hearing the Javelin here, I feel a little better. Seeing that the Javelin is restored, Xingai also ordered, this is our first defense of the port area. You two, Ray Fit and Javelin, must wipe out all the incoming sirens. Did you hear me? Roger that. Yes, the task must be completed. Seeing that both of them were ready, Xingai said, the first combat mission, begin. After Xingai finished talking about the Javelin, he went into the water. Because of the ship's equipment, the ship's mother can stand on the sea, which is why the ship's mother can become the main force at sea. But if there is no summoned ship equipment, the ship's mother can't stand on the sea. Javelin was wondering how Raffi would stand on the sea. After all, Raffi didn't even have a ship to summon, but what happened next completely shattered Javelin's worldview. I saw the moment Raffi was about to step on the water, a disc appeared at Raffi's feet, and then Raffi stood on the disc, and the disc floated on the surface of the sea, supporting Raffi steadily. Diamond-shaped crystals also appeared around La Fight, emitting a light blue light. Raffi frowned when he saw there were only 4 crystals beside him, and he seemed very upset. What are these La Fight sauces? Is this your ship outfit? What are those crystals? Why are you in a ship outfit like this? Seeing Ray Fit's ship outfit, the Javelin suddenly exclaimed. Raffi's brows stretched out when he heard the Javelin call. Gun gun. Seeing the Javelin seemed incomprehensible, so Raffi added another sentence, floating cannon. Ray Fit didn't explain this time, because several black spots could already be seen on the sea in the distance, and it should be the siren that struck. The Javelin also spotted the siren. She was ready for combat. When she was about to step forward, she saw a beam of light passing by. Then the siren in the distance exploded a violent spark. It seemed that there was already one. The siren was sunk. But La Fight seemed very dissatisfied with this. The 4 crystal-shaped floating cannons were fully fired, and beams of light attacked the siren in the distance, bursting out fires. Only a few seconds later, only a piece of fire remained on the distant sea. See, the enemy has all been eliminated. Seeing this, Xingai couldn't help but feel a little dumb. He didn't expect La Fight to turn on its firepower directly. Although this state is less than 1/10,000th of La Fight's heyday, it has already brought a considerable impact on the javelin. Now the javelin was still there and stared at the flames. Javelin! It wasn't until Zingai shouted that the javelin came back to his senses. He glanced at Raffi and said, "Commander, what's the matter?" Seeing Javelin's reaction, Zingai was also a little helpless. He didn't expect that Raffi's behavior would have such a big impact on the javelin. Now he can only wait for a while to start the javelin. After all, there are other things to do. Javelin, you and Tweets pull back the wreckage of the siren, those we will need later. Oh, the javelin responded. Although she was confused now, she still cheered up, and then turned the ship into a hull and headed towards the wreckage. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest. After the javelin dragged the wreckage back, he had been sitting on the beach in a daze, and had been sitting there for a long time. Zingai sighed as he watched the javelin sitting on the beach with his legs in a daze. Raffi also noticed the abnormality of the javelin, and at this time Raffi had already walked towards the javelin. Raffi walked to the javelin, then handed a red bottle to the javelin, while sitting beside the javelin. "Give it's La Fight sauce." Raffi's movements startled the javelin, and the javelin took the bottle in a daze. "What is this? La Fight's favorite thing is a gift for a good friend. Is it for me?" Raffi nodded, then took a sip of his bottle. Seeing Raffi's movements, Javelin also took a sip from the bottle in his hand. Ahem, cough. Before taking a sip of the javelin, he spit out the liquid from his mouth on the ground, then coughed violently, and his face became flushed. Raffi tilted his head and looked at the javelin that reacted violently, and said, "Javelin, don't like it." Javelin did not immediately answer La Fight's question, but coughed for a while before weakly saying, "La Fight sauce, is this wine?" "Okay." Raffi nodded and said, "Don't you like the javelin?" No. Hearing Rafi's question again, Javelin waved his hand quickly and said, "I don't like the gift of Rafi's sauce, but I'm not good at drinking." "Neither of you are allowed to drink at this moment." Both hands stretched out, took the wine bottle in the hands of Raffi and Javelin directly, and then handed them a red bottle. Javelin looked up and saw that Zingai didn't know when he had already stood behind them. "Hey, La Fight has grown up." La Fight raised his head and said unhappy. "No way is no way." Zingai ignored La Fight's grievances and instead taught a lesson, "Even if you can drink, you shouldn't drink the javelin. She is not old enough to drink." "Commander, this is..." Javelin looked at the bottle in his hand, and asked with lingering fear. Hearing Javelin's question, Zingai smiled and said, "Don't worry, this is just Coke, not red wine." Javelin took a long breath after hearing the words, then took a small sip, still looking a little scared, until he was sure that the bottle was really Coke. He took another sip. Well. La Fight on the side saw that there was no room for turning back, and drank the Coke in his hand like a temper, then threw the bottle aside. "Commander, is there no problem with Rafit like this?" Javelin asked cautiously when he saw Rafit, who was angry. Seeing Javelin's worry, Zingai couldn't help but feel a little amused. Just now, he looked disappointed, and now he began to worry about others. "No problem." Zingai shook his head. "La Fight, she just vented her grievances. This is a common thing and will soon be cured, but is there any problem with Javelin?" Hearing this, Javelin glanced carefully at Raffi, and stopped talking. Seeing the Javelin's worry, Zingai smiled and said, "Don't worry, La Fight won't blame you, but you made her worried just now. You have to know that the red wine La Fight gave you just now has been treasured by La Fight for a long time. There is no treasure to drink." "Hey, isn't that precious?" Javelin said in surprise. "Yes," Zingai said, "it's better to tell us about your troubles, you don't want Raffia to worry about it all the time." Javelin hesitated, then glanced at La Fight, and said with a bit of loss, "The commander has a navy like La Fight, then I will be useless. Will the commander abandon me?" "Ha ha ha ha!" Zingai burst out laughing when he heard the Javelin's heart. "It turns out that Javelin, you have been worried about such trivial things. Zingai's laugh embarrassed Javelin, so Javelin said angrily, "What's such a trivial matter, isn't it a very important event?" Seeing that Javelin was really angry, Zingai stopped laughing, and said, "If Javelin, you are worried about this problem, then you can rest assured." "Why?" Javelin asked suspiciously. "You see that Raffi is very strong, right?" Zingai said. Yeah, Javelin nodded. "If I told you that Ray Fit's strength yesterday was less than 1/10,000th of what Ray Fit was at his peak. How is this possible?" The Javelin was even more surprised. She had already seen Ray Fit's strength. That is a powerful force that can single out an entire fleet. If it is only a small part of Ray Fit's strength, what is the Javelin? I don't believe it. It's true. Zingai sat next to the Javelin and said, looking at the endless sea, "Didn't you ask me why I should be a commander before?" "Hey!" Javelin looked at Zingai suspiciously. Zingai looked at the sea, his eyes gradually became deep. I and Lafitte were both travelers. We have been to many amazing places, we have met many people, and we have seen many things. Although those days are very busy, they are also very fulfilling. Lafitte and I once thought that we would continue to do this until... At this point, Zingai stopped. Then, why did the commander come to be the commander? Seeing Zingai stopped, the Javelin who wanted to know the follow-up hurriedly asked. Zingai stopped for a while, and was so anxious that the Javelin was going crazy before he said, "Because of my relationship with Raffi, we decided to get married, but on the day of our wedding, because of my mistakes, we were taken by our enemies on the day of the wedding. In ambush, Ray Fit suffered a very serious injury. To protect me, to heal Ray Fit's injuries, and to avoid our enemies, so I chose to be a commander." "But this is not self-contradictory," Javelin said puzzledly. "If the commander wants Raffia to heal his injuries, shouldn't he go to a safer place? Here we'll be attacked by sirens at any time, isn't it more dangerous?" Zingai smiled slightly and said, "Do you think any siren can beat Ray Fit? Is there anything safer than hiding on these islands?" Hearing Zingai's words, the Javelin couldn't help but feel dumb. If you want to hide from people, with the strength of Raffi, this is indeed the safest place. After thinking for a while, the Javelin said in a low voice, But, what does this have to do with me?" Seeing the Javelin's mood depressed again, Zingai said, "Didn't you say it before? Raffi and I came to avoid the enemy, so Raffi couldn't use her power frequently, so when the siren struck you need a Javelin to fight. Isn't that important? Besides, even if you have no use for the Javelin, I won't abandon you." "I'm not useless at all," Javelin retorted, "I am very powerful, and I will definitely protect Lafitte's sauce, because I and Lafitte are friends." This is when Raffi came over and suddenly hugged the Javelin, saying, "Raffi will also protect the Javelin." The Javelin that was suddenly hugged was panicked and hugged Raffi, the shyness on his face could not be covered. Seeing that the relationship between the two girls was getting better again, Zingai couldn't help but smile. "I really hope that such days can last longer. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest." After Raffi and Javelin returned to good condition, Zingai invested in the construction of the port area, and Javelin began to train hard to make himself stronger, hoping to become stronger soon. The construction of the port area is very fast. If the project is carried out at a manual speed, it will take about half a year, but the senior construction team only took about a week to complete the construction of the port area. Fortunately, no other siren attacked this week, which also reduced the danger of a large number of siren in the port area, allowing Zingai to have more time to develop its fleet. The newly built port area is almost exactly the same as the drawings of Tweets, except that it takes time to grow green. Zingai is very satisfied with this. On the day that the port area was built, Tweets also specially held a ribbon-cutting ceremony. After that, because the port area had already been delivered, Tweets disappeared again bizarrely, and no one was seen again. Because the Navy canteen was also built, and Xingai brought frozen vegetables, fruits, and meats among the supplies. Xingai took out a part and held a small celebration banquet with the Rafi javelin. Of course, it is Xingai who cooks. After all, Xingai's cooking level has reached a considerable level because of long-term travel. After eating the javelin, he even issued a declaration of no regrets in his life. Xingai's residence was arranged on the top floor of the lecture hall, which was specifically requested by Xingai. Because although the dormitory has been built, most of the dormitories will be girls by then, and it is not convenient for Xingai to live in it. So Xingai asked the construction team to set up a separate room on the top floor of the lecture hall. This room it is arranged next to the Xingai office, which is also for the convenience of future office work. At the same time, Tweet and Tweet also thoughtfully solved the power supply problem for Xingai. Tweet and Tweet have placed wind turbines on the island, and tidal power generators are also placed in the sea around the island. The power of the two generators is equivalent to 1. The level of horror, even if the facilities are doubled in the future, the power generated by these engine sets is more than enough. This cannot help but make Xingai sigh. Tweet is really professional. However, because the population of the port area is too small, many facilities are in a state of suspension, such as the very important greenhouse area, which will be the source of vegetables and food for everyone on the island in the future, but because of insufficient manpower, even with an intelligent management system, it is impossible. Therefore, Xingai must first expand the population of the port area. And because Xingai only has a small dry dock, it is very inefficient and only produces light ships. After a lot of small lowly, Xingai gave up the idea of using the Rubik's Cube to expand the port area, and instead gave them a diamond. After hiring Tweets to take care of these auxiliary facilities, Tweets were also very happy to agree. It has been more than half a month since the port area was completed. Xingai was sitting in the office board at this time. It is now more than 9 o'clock in the morning. At this time, Javelin took the later ship ladies out for training. Rafi also followed in order to protect them. We went together, and now the port area has just started. There is basically nothing wrong with Xingai, the training of the ship ladies, and Xingai can't help much, and some of the chores have been done by Tweets, so Xingai is completely idle now. Just when Xingai felt bored, there was a throbbing suddenly. Xingai's heart moved, and a thick book with a silver cover appeared in front of Xingai. The style of the thick book is very classical. There is no handwriting on the cover, only a circular magic circle, and a small lock on the side of the thick book. Seeing this book, Xingai couldn't help having mixed feelings. It was because of this book that he and Ray Fit were sneak attacked by others and had to hide in this place after being seriously injured. "Let me see what exactly you do," Xingai muttered to himself, and at the same time he flipped his right hand, and a transparent ball appeared in his hand. Xingai put the ball on the thick paper, and saw a magical thing happen. The original crystal-like sphere slowly melted away, but the melted sphere did not flow to the ground. Instead, it penetrated into the thick paper book. No drop was left. The thick paper book that absorbed the sphere was bright put. There were also 4 large characters on the cover that hadn't originally had a single word. Dimensional illustrated book. Immediately afterwards, a line of small characters appeared under the 4 characters of the Dimensional illustrated book binder. Dimensional Traveler number 14444. Xingai. Seeing the code name Xingai on the Dimensional illustrated book, he couldn't help showing a wry smile, which really evoked his rather bad memories. Xingai once lived on a small planet called Earth, and lived an ordinary life, until one day a voice rang in his mind and asked him if he wanted to be a dimensional traveler. The young and energetic, he did not hesitate, he agreed. He thought it was the beginning of an adventure, but he never expected it to be a painful beginning. Dimensional travelers have the ability to travel through different worlds, and their only responsibility is to record the humanity and landforms of each world in a book called Dimensional Travel Record. As for why Xingai did this, it is unknown. However, dimensional travelers are outsiders after all and will be rejected by the world. Because of dimensional travel records, this time is generally slow, usually around 10 to 20 years. The influence of the dimensional traveler who is excluded from the world will be gradually eliminated in this world. In popular terms, it is your friend and lover, who will gradually forget your name and things with you until there is no more in this world. No one remembers your deeds anymore. When you see you, you can no longer interfere with the world and become a completely transparent person. Moreover, this kind of rejection is sudden, and people have no defense at all. When you see your lover, your friend gradually forgets you, and finally treats you as air, you think about it. Terrible thing. Even more terrifying is that you will live in a world for decades or even hundreds of years as a transparent person. That kind of loneliness can drive a person crazy until one day you will be taken to a new world and start a new round of reincarnation. Because of being repelled by the world, you will never be able to return to that world, and you will not be able to bring out any items. In this way, Xingai sank endless years in this painful reincarnation, and didn't escape this endless sea of suffering until he met another dimensional traveler. At this time, the light of the dimensional illustrated book had converged and landed on the table in front of Xingai. Xingai hesitated, then picked up the dimensional illustrated book from the table and placed it in his hand to look carefully. At this time, the dimensional illustrated book is exactly the same as an ordinary book, and it looks completely featureless. Just as Xingai wondered how to open the book, with the sound of click, click, the small lock suddenly opened, and the dimensional illustrated book opened by itself. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest. As the dimensional illustrated book opened, Xingai found a paragraph written in some unknown text on the title page of the dimensional illustrated book. Xingai stared at the unknown font, with a halo in his eyes. Lines of text seemed to pass by, and those words that were originally incomprehensible were also translated in Xingai's mind. The original intent of the paragraph on the title page is probably, I was an ordinary dimensional traveler, but under many great opportunities, I gained a powerful and mysterious power, and gradually learned about the conspiracy behind the dimensional traveler, not willing to be the black hand behind it. I was dominated by tens of thousands of years and finally found a way out, but for some reason my behavior was known by the black hand behind the dimensional traveler, and under the siege of the powerful soldiers they sent, I had to go everywhere. Fleeing, at the end of the road, I turned the way out I found into a dimensional illustrated book and sent it away with special abilities. I hope that someone who is predestined can get the dimensional illustrated book. The owner can use this book to turn the powerful in different worlds into his own use. I hope that the holder can help me wait for the dimensional traveler to escape from this boundless sea of suffering, but I can only get it by borrowing this book. After writing here, there will be no more words, maybe for some reason, it may not be finished, and according to the statement in the book, there may be a big conspiracy behind the dimensional traveler, and the dimensional illustration is the only way to crack the conspiracy, but after this passage, Xingai Zhou frowned. Although the book said that the head is Tao, but it is still his one-sided words, and Xingai is not ignorant of dimensional travelers, and more importantly, Xingai does not believe that a person who has planned for tens of thousands of years will be so easy. Give the results of their own efforts to others. The dimensional illustrated book was discovered by Xingai in a small independent space in a world. Together with it is an encrypted envelope. The envelope says that as long as the dimensional traveler's dimensional travel core is absorbed by the dimensional illustrated book, you can have the dimensional. The right to use the illustrated book, but the specific role of the dimensional illustrated book has not been mentioned. Since Xingai got the dimensional illustrated book, there have been other dimensional travelers coming to inquire about the dimensional illustrated book, but they have been prevaricated by Xingai until the day they started their hands on Xingai for this book. But there are still many doubts in this. For example, even Lafite doesn't know about the dimensional illustrated book, how other people know about it, and Xingai hasn't heard anything about the role of the dimensional illustrated book, so why do those people think about it? Is the dimensional illustrated book so obsessed? Moreover, the use conditions of the dimensional illustrated book require the dimensional travel core. The dimensional travel core is the only prop for dimensional travelers to travel through the world. Losing the dimensional travel core is equivalent to losing the identity of the dimensional traveler, which is unacceptable to many people. Dimensional travelers will be repelled by the world, but what you have learned before that and what you use will be owned by yourself. This is also a way for dimensional travelers to become stronger, and for some wicked elements, what can be better than is it easier to escape after committing a crime in this way? Therefore, Xingai is puzzled by the reasons why those people are desperate to take action on themselves. It is necessary to know that not only the cost of not having the core of dimensional travel is huge, but Xingai is not a weak person even among countless dimensional travelers. But Xingai's dimensional travel core has lost the ability to travel. This is why he did not hesitate to abandon his dimensional travel core. As for the reason why the dimensional travel core broke, it was the price of his return to this world. When Xingai was thinking, the dimensional illustrated book suddenly turned another page automatically, and there were a few new lines on this page, and it was a font recognized by Xingai. Xingai's eyes flashed, but he thought a lot, because there was only one sentence on this page: "The disappeared singer." This sentence is not so much a sentence as it is a title, but what does it mean? After all, Xingai has never seen other people use the dimensional illustrated book, and there is no manual for this thing, so Xingai can only go on his own. Guess the meaning of this sentence. The disappearing singer sounds like a literary work, and it is a kind of sadness, but this kind of understanding is definitely wrong. Dimensional illustrated book, does it have anything to do with dimensional travel? Thinking of this, Xingai put his hand on the page of the book. Sure enough, he felt a very special kind of fluctuation. This kind of fluctuation was very similar to the fluctuation when he traveled through the world, and the fluctuation became more and more after Xingai put his hand on the page. The stronger it came, it seemed that he would start to shuttle with Xingai. Xingai decisively retracted his palm, and the fluctuation gradually fell silent until it disappeared. The role of the dimensional illustrated book is actually to travel through the world, but what is the difference between this and the core of dimensional travel? So many people are pursuing this book, it shouldn't have this completely useless function. Xingai could not think of the special role of the dimensional illustrated book. But he dare not try it himself, because he already has a foundation here, and his injury is not good. If he travels through the world so hastily, it will be bad if he can't come back or encounter danger. You must know that some worlds are quite dangerous, so Xingai decided to discuss this together when Raffi returned. In the evening, Lafite and the others finally came back, pulling the wreckage of the siren behind them. These wreckages will be used to build the new dry dock in the port area, because the dry dock brought by Xingai is completely tasteless. The construction of the new dry dock requires the wreckage of siren, so Raffi and the others are not only training these days, but also hunting some lower-level siren. Moreover, only actual combat can quickly improve their combat effectiveness. After having dinner in the naval cafeteria with the ship ladies, Xingai took Raffi and left. Seeing Xingai and Rafit leave together, he loosely pulled the corner of the javelin and said, "Sister Javelin, why doesn't Sister Rafit sleep with us but with the commander?" The expression of eating was a little embarrassed by the loose question. She hesitated for a while and said, "Because Lafite is the commander's oath ship." "Hey, Sister Raffi is already the commander's oath ship," Song said in surprise. Then I saw other little lowly crowding up to ask Javelin about Xingai and Raffi. Lafite was also very confused about Xingai hurriedly pulling herself away. After Xingai took her to the office, she glanced at Xingai and said, "Hi, do you want it?" Xingai was taken aback, and then smiled bitterly, "How can you have such thoughts, and am I that kind of person?" Raffi tilted his head and said, "Isn't it?" Hearing that Xingai didn't know what to say, in order to change the subject, he summoned the dimensional illustrated book and asked, "Lafite, see if this thing is dangerous." Lafite took the dimensional illustrated book, then closed her eyes, and saw a ray of brilliance emerge in her hand, covering the entire dimensional illustrated book. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest. Standing in front of the Sea of Stars, Lafite was holding the dimensional illustrated book in his hand. There was brilliance surging in his body. From time to time, several magic circles or strings of codes appeared and then disappeared immediately. This situation lasted for about an hour before the brilliance of Lafite began to recede slowly. After a while, the brilliance of Rayfit completely disappeared, and Rayfit opened his eyes. Xingai didn't speak, but looked at Lafite quietly, waiting for her to give the result of the query. But after waiting for a long time, Lafite didn't say a word. Seeing this, Xingai showed a strange expression on his face. "Do you want that?" Xingai smiled. Lafite looked at Xingai quietly, without a trace of expression on her face. Xingai shook his head helplessly, walked over to pick up Raffi, let Raffi sit on his lap, and kissed Raffi on the forehead. "Not enough." Raffi looked at Xingai said, "Raffi needs more rewards." Hearing that, Xingai showed a petting smile, and then kissed again, and this time the target was Raffi's lips. The two lingered for a while before they separated, and Lafite lay softly in Xingai's arms, with a satisfied expression on his face. Xingai squeezed Lafite's face and joked, "Well, my little princess, can you tell me what the book is about now?" After hearing Xingai's question, Lafite sat up from Xingai's arms and said, "Lafite has detected an unexplained surgical technique inside. In addition, he has also detected a large number of techniques for positioning on the outside of the book. Just now Raffi has cleared or blocked those techniques. Those people may have used these techniques to track us before, but the core technique of this book is very strange. It is a technique that Raffi has never seen before. The function seems to be used to shuttle the world and locate the return coordinates. Other functions of Rayfit cannot be determined." Then Rayfit carefully explained the function of the technique she knew at Xingai's request. Xingai pondered for a moment, and said, "Lafite, you mean that you can use this book to travel back and forth in the world? Is it dangerous?" "Hi, what do you want to do?" Lafite's tone suddenly became serious. Although Lafite did not detect any dangerous technique in it, it does not prove that the book is not dangerous. Lafite does not want to look at the sea. "Take risks. Is your life bad now?" Xingai smiled bitterly and said, "Lafite, do you really think we will never be discovered? Although our life is very peaceful now, no one would think that we could actually go back to the world we were in before. We are ostracized, but there are always some people with special hands that will find our hiding spot. If that day really comes, what should we do?" But... Lafite's tone still lacked a trace of emotion, but Xingai saw deep sadness in Lafite's eyes. Lafite didn't want Hai to do those dangerous things again. "Rayfi, Lafite has always in fear that one day the sea will suddenly disappear in Lafite's world. All of this should have been undertaken by Lafite, but Lafite has not fulfilled the required obligations." Xingai's eyes flashed softly when he heard Rayfit's words. He touched Rayfit's head and said, "Don't worry, I must have some certainty when I decide to do these things. Rayfit doesn't need to be too worried." Lafite did not speak, but hugged Xingai firmly. Xingai didn't know what to say, so he hugged Rayfit too. "Hug me." "I don't know how long it took," Rayfit, who had shrunk herself in Xingai's arms, suddenly said. Xingai was stunned for a moment, then picked up Lafite and walked to the bedroom. The next day, Xingai looked at Raffi, who was still sleeping in his arms, and kissed Raffi on the forehead, then got up and got dressed and left the bedroom. The moment Raffi opened his eyes in Xingai's bedroom. "Hi, you must come back safely, Rayfit will always be here waiting for you." Xingai left the bedroom and came to the office. After sitting quietly for a while, he summoned the dimensional illustrated book. Looking at the dimensional illustrated book, Xingai sighed again. Although he has a lot of backhands, all those backhands are things that cost a huge price. He doesn't want to take these risks if he can, but life is often like this. There are always things that force you to work hard, because if you don't work hard, you will only be pushed to death by these things. Zingai exhaled, discarding all the thoughts in his mind, and then placed his hand on the page where the disappeared singer was written. As that wave of fluctuations gradually increased, the space around Zingai began to twist, until Zingai disappeared in place. Following a dazzling light, Zingai gradually woke up. He sat up and looked around. This is a small room. The room is covered with various posters. There are also a lot of figures on the table. The dazzling light just came in from the window along the gap in the curtain. Zingai glanced at the clock on the table. It showed that it was past 9 o'clock in the morning. How is this going? Looking at the surrounding furnishings, Zingai frowned. Dimensional travelers are forced into the world every time they enter the world. There is no identity, and they are a complete outsider, which is why they are excluded. But now he neither feels the repulsive power of the world, and the surrounding environment seems to tell him that he now has a legal identity. Is it a soul replacement? Zingai moved a bit. His body seemed to be his own and not someone else's. With a movement in Zingai's heart, a straight knife appeared in his hand. The armor can be summoned. This is really my own body. The shock in Zingai's heart at this time is beyond words. Because of the dimensional travelers themselves, they will always be rejected by the world. There has not been a dimensional travel for so many years. The author can solve this problem, but today he actually has a legal identity in this strange world. But now I see that none of these things are necessary. The more important thing now is to know what kind of person the original identity of this identity is, because Zingai cannot be sure when he suddenly shows behavior that does not match the original behavior of this identity. Will he be targeted by the will of the world? After all, he is still just an outsider, so he now needs to know everything about this identity. Zingai looked at the table and found that there was no diary or the like. The only thing he had was a large number of animation peripherals, which showed that the original body was an anime lover. Zingai checked the original body's phone again. There are only a few people in the phone address book, and most of them are based on relatives. This shows that the original body's social network is not wide, but this is good news. The odds will be smaller, which is a part of Zingai's advantage. Just as Zingai was overturning the cabinets, there was a sound of da-da-da footsteps, and it was getting closer and closer to this room. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Zingai paused, then immediately returned to the bed, pretending that he was still sleeping. After a while, the footsteps reached the door of Zingai, but the owner of the footsteps did not enter the room, but stopped at the door. I made the meal and put it in the refrigerator. If you are hungry, heat it up by yourself. I have something to do. I won't be back tonight. A girl's voice came from outside the door. The girl's tone was very cold and seemed to be very bad for the senses of the people in the room. The girl left immediately after speaking, and refused to stay for a moment, as if she was very disgusted with the people in the room. Of course, there might be very important things waiting for her. However, looking at the girl's tone, Zingai felt that the probability of the former situation was higher. After the girl left, Zingai continued to lie down on the bed for a while, and only after confirming that the girl had left, Zingai sat up from the bed. After sitting up, Zingai immediately walked towards the table, because he found the original computer on the table just now, but Zingai didn't know the password and it was troublesome to crack the password, so Zingai focused on other places at first, but now after searching in other places to no avail, Zingai had to put his idea on this computer. Although there is no password, Zingai still turned on the computer. For this simple password cracking skill, almost every dimensional traveler must have it, because if you want to understand a world in a technological world, the internet is always the best something fast. After turning on the computer, the desktop of the computer was filled with various games, all of which were mainly in anime style, but apart from these, Zingai did not find other useful information in the computer, so I had no choice but to collect it online. Some useful information. After a few hours, Xingai had a general understanding of the world. This is a planet-shaped world. The name of the planet is called Blue Star. It is a typical non-magic low-tech world. There is no special power, at least Xingai hasn't found it on the internet. The only thing worth noting is that when Xingai searched for the disappeared singer in the search box, a lot of information about the virtual singer popped up on the internet. After Xingai searched the virtual singer a little bit, he found that the virtual singer covered almost every aspect of the world. Virtual singers seem to be a very important part of this world. A virtual singer. Xingai decided to find some time to explore these virtual singers. After all, the singers were also mentioned in the Dimensional Illustrated Book. Xingai initially thought it was a career or some literary work, but now it seems that the singers in the disappeared singers, it is very likely that these virtual singers. Xingai left the room after not finding the information he wanted, so he decided to look for it elsewhere in the room. Xingai came from the living room. The girl who was talking had already left. Now there is no one empty in the room, but this is in line with Xingai's heart, and it is even more troublesome for someone to do it. Xingai searched the house and found nothing useful in the house. This is what an ordinary family looks like, and there is hardly any information about the original body. After a careful search, Xingai found a covered photo frame on the cabinet in the living room. Inside the photo frame was a photo of a family of 4. The boy in the photo was almost exactly the same as Xingai when he was a child. This made Xingai a lot of doubts. Is the Dimensional Illustrated Book directly tampering with the world in order to put me into this world, but is this kind of thing really possible? Xingai couldn't believe it. If it was really what he thought, how terrifying would the Dimensional Illustrated Book be? Power. Xingai learned about the situation of his original body after almost turning over the entire house. Of course, most of it was learned in the diary of his sister Hidaka Chika. This is a very ordinary family. According to Hidaka Kyunhua's diary, their family should have been very happy when they were young, but an accident took away their parents' lives 3 years ago, and her brother Hidaka Xingai she also became depressed because of this blow, which was a huge blow to her who was only 12 years old at the time. But life still has to go on. After Hidaka Xingai became an autistic patient, she had to shoulder the responsibility of taking care of her brother. At the same time, she also provided various comforts to Hidaka Xingai, but in the end, not only did she not let Hidaka Xingai cheered up, but made Hidaka Xingai's mood more and more irritable. Finally, after Hidaka Xingai broke her most cherished crystal necklace under her pleading, she finally despaired of Hidaka Xingai. No matter what happened to Hidaka Xingai, and Hidaka Xingai didn't have any conversation with Hidaka Kyunhua, the two people lived in this house like strangers. Xingai pondered after learning about the original body's situation. The advantage of this situation is that the possibility of him being found abnormal is greatly reduced, but the interpersonal communication that the original body has almost no will bring a lot of trouble. And from what we know now, this is an innocent world, which makes many of his methods unavailable. If he uses anomalous powers in an innocent, he will definitely be targeted by the will of the world. At that time, but it's really troublesome. After roughly understanding the situation, Xingai returned to his room and searched the internet for information about the virtual singer again. The virtual singer is not a product of modern times. There were related products in the last century. At that time, the virtual singer was just a vocal synthesis software, but then someone added advanced artificial intelligence to the virtual singer. It formed what it is now. The current virtual singer is low in cost, rich in image, and there is no need to worry about various scandals. After adding artificial intelligence, it is almost no different from real people. With the addition of the virtual singer customization function, the image of virtual singer can quickly enter thousands. You can say that virtual singers are the hottest existence nowadays. Xingai thought carefully after reading the information about the virtual singer found on the internet. Virtual singers, disappeared singers, do you mean these virtual singers will disappear? No, it can't be the case. Now the virtual singers have too much influence. If they disappear suddenly, they will definitely cause social unrest, and there is no reason why they will disappear suddenly. If these virtual singers disappear, then the virtual songs that disappeared there may be only one or a few G. Looking at it this way, the possibility is very great. But who is the disappearing singer? There must be some clues, but why does the dimensional illustrated book write such a sentence, I am in this world, what is the purpose of, ... While Xingai was thinking hard about the virtual singer, Hidaka Kunhua also returned home. She walked to the refrigerator to find something to eat. After opening the refrigerator, she found that the dishes she cooked in the morning had not changed. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening, and she knew that Hidaka Xingai wouldn't order any takeaway at all, which meant that Hidaka Xingai had not eaten a bite of rice from last night until now. Thinking of this, Hidaka Kunhua's dissatisfaction with Hidaka Xingai and her grievance broke out together, and she walked to the room of Asahi Gao Xingai angrily. If you like Dimension Jianyang, please collect it. Dimension Jianyang's literature is updated fastest.